Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast, coming to you from the Long Valley Studio in Washington, Utah. I'm your host, Dave Markel, and this is episode 193. Normally, I'd be introducing you to a guest right about now, but instead, like last week, it's just me. The reason is pretty simple. I don't have an episode ready. I wish I had a more interesting explanation than that, but I don't. This past week got away from me. Family was in town, life was busy, and a few things took more time and energy than I had expected. And before I knew it, I found myself looking at the calendar and realizing it was time to release another episode. My first thought was to skip the week. I suspect most podcasters do that from time to time. Schedules get disrupted, recordings fall through, and sometimes there just isn't an episode ready when you need one. But the more I thought about it, the less I liked that idea. I've never totally skipped an episode, and I didn't want to start now. Part of the reason is that this podcast has become such a regular part of my life that it felt strange not to sit down in front of the microphone this week. Another part is that I genuinely look forward to these conversations even when I'm the one doing all the talking. As I was trying to decide what to record instead, I found myself thinking about how long I've been doing this. And like last week, when I pointed out that this show is close to 200 episodes, it still sounds a little ridiculous when I say it out loud. When I started this podcast, I had no idea whether anyone would listen. I certainly didn't have a vision of what it would look like years later. I just thought there might be value in creating a place where survivors could tell their stories in their own words without somebody interrupting, questioning them, or trying to reshape their experiences into something more comfortable for everyone else. What surprises me is that the basic idea still feels just as important to me as it did then. The technology has changed, and the audience has grown for sure, and the show has reached people in places I never expected. But the part that matters most has remained exactly the same. It's still about listening. That may sound obvious coming from someone who hosts an interview podcast, but I don't think I fully appreciated the difference between hearing someone and truly listening to them until I started doing this show. And it's something I tend to emphasize now more than ever, especially to those of you who investigate sexual assault and rape cases. It's much more important to listen to a victim or a survivor's experience than it is to hear them try to conform to an interviewer's check-the-box list of questions. I've had conversations with people whose experiences were very different from one another. Their backgrounds were different, and their circumstances were definitely different. And the way they made sense of what happened to them was often different as well. What I've come to appreciate is that there's no shortcut to understanding another person's experience. You can't get there by assuming, nor can you get there by relying on stereotypes. And you certainly can't get there by deciding in advance what somebody's story is supposed to sound like. The only way I've found is to listen long enough for the person to tell you. That sounds simple. It isn't. Most of us are far better at preparing our responses than we are at listening. I know that used to be the case with me. And one of the unexpected things that this podcast has done for me is force me to slow down and pay attention in a different way. When you're interviewing someone for an hour or two, you begin to notice things that don't show up in headlines or statistics. You begin to understand how complicated people's lives really are. You start to see how much courage it can take for somebody to talk about an experience they've carried for years. I've learned a tremendous amount from these conversations. Not because the guests set out to teach me anything. Most of them weren't trying to. They were simply telling the truth about their lives. There's something powerful about that. Not powerful in the dramatic sense, powerful because honesty has a way of cutting through a lot of noise. I think that's one of the reasons stories matter. A good story doesn't tell you what to think. It gives you an opportunity to see the world through someone else's eyes for a little while. That's something our culture could probably use more of. And if investigators and prosecutors would learn this, they'd make sure that juries and judges listened to these experiences that way too. And we'd get more cases prosecuted and more convictions, and we'd start making an incredible impact on rape culture in our society. One thing I never expected when I started this podcast was the number of messages I'd receive from listeners. Some of those messages have stayed with me for years. People often write to tell me about a particular episode that resonated with them. Sometimes it's because they recognized part of their own experience in a guest's story. Other times it's because they finally understood something about a friend, a spouse, a child, or another person that they really care about. What those messages have taught me is that connection often happens in ways we don't anticipate. A guest shares a story with no idea who might hear it. Months later, somebody sends me a note explaining that the conversation helped them make sense of something they'd been struggling with for years. That's a remarkable thing when you stop and think about it. A stranger tells the truth about their life, and that truth ends up helping another stranger hundreds or thousands of miles away. I've seen that happen enough now that I no longer think it's unusual. I think it's one of the reasons this podcast continues to exist. So, since I don't have a guest for you this week, consider this a brief check-in. The show is doing fine. I'm doing fine. There are more conversations coming, and there are more guests coming with their own stories to tell. For today, though, I simply wanted to spend a few minutes with you and acknowledge something that probably doesn't get said often enough. I appreciate the fact that you're here. There are a lot of podcasts competing for your time and attention. The fact that you've chosen to spend part of your day listening to this one is something I don't take lightly. So thank you for listening, and thank you for continuing to support these conversations. Mostly, I thank you for helping create a space where survivors know their voices matter. Please remember to start by believing, because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. I'll see you next week.